those data that has been labeled. So we'll be using this to train the model. So imagine that, let's say we have a model here. Okay, so this is our model. So we want this model to be able to recognize a cat. Okay, let's say we want this model to learn how to differentiate whether this animal is a cat or not a cat. So we will need to train this model to be able to recognize a cat first, right? Before it can do the task to differentiate between cat and non-cat first. So when we want to train this model, you see, we will need to give this model the image of a cat. Okay, we will have to give this model the image of the cat. But it's not only just the image, but we have to also put in the label to the model so that this is a labeled data. So we will need to tell this model, okay, this image here representing a cat. Okay, so this is so-called a label. It will not only just fit in the data to the model, but we have to fit in this label to the model as well. Okay, so the label is like the standard answer, the correct answer that we wish the model is able to predict. So before the model can learn anything, so we will tell this model in advance, okay, what you see here is a cat. All right. So when this model got this labeled data, so what it does is that during the training period, the model will try to look into the image, just the image first. It will try to predict without looking at the label. So it will try to predict, okay, and say, okay, this is a fish. Maybe, for example, it will say this is a fish. So after it gives its own prediction, it will then compare its own predictions with the label and see how far is the difference. Okay, so remember, it will not read the label first, but it will try to predict itself first. Only then it will compare its predictions with the label to see how far is the difference. So here, when we are comparing, we will try to calculate how far is the difference. So after the calculations, if let's say we found that the difference is very huge, the difference is very far away, so we will let this model to adjust itself. In the model, there's a lot of parameters. It will talk about the parameters later. So no matter how, this model will try to adjust its parameter, adjust itself. And so the next time when it got fit with the same images, so it will try to predict again. And now this time, I believe that with the better parameters, it can predict some answer which is closer to the label. For example, now maybe this time it will predict it as a dog, for example. Okay, so somehow this is closer to the cat, right, instead of the fish, but yet it is still not the correct answer. So it will try to adjust itself again. It will adjust itself again all the way until it can get us the result that is as close as possible to the label. So throughout the entire training process here, the model will be trained by this data for a several times. And then during the training of this several round, it will try to adjust itself again and again and again until it can yield some data or yield some result that can be close to the label. So now you can see during the training process here, the model will always refer to the label, refer to the label, and refer to the label and adjust itself, isn't it? So the label now here is like a supervisor to the model, which the model has to refer and adjust itself. So it needs to be able to yield some result that is close to the label. So the label is like a target. It's like a supervisor to the model. Okay, so that's why the name of this learning method here is a supervised learning. This model is supervised by the label. So that's why when you want to carry out this supervised learning to train this model, you have to make sure that all the data must be labeled data. All right, yeah, so that is a criteria for carry out this supervised learning. Okay, well, the other method here to train a model is what we call as a unsupervised learning. Okay, so unsupervised learning means, okay, it doesn't matter if you don't have the labeled data, but the thing is that when we want to carry out the unsupervised learning, just the unlabeled data will be enough. It doesn't matter if the data doesn't have any label. So when we train this model, we will just use unlabeled data. Unlabeled data, the data that do not have any label. Okay, we do not need to explicitly go and label the data. No need. right? So let's say now we want to train this model be able to differentiate between different animals. So we just need to fit these different animals images to the model. So what the model will do is that it will try to look into the features of the animal in the input data. It will try to observe the feature. And so after it observed the feature, after it learned the features, so it will put this input, the training data, into one category. For example, okay, this is category number one. Category number one. All right. So with this feature of a triangular ears, with the mesi, with the nose like this, okay, animals with these features, okay, will be put into category number one. So now the next round here, let's say this model was fit with the animal with the features like this. It's a fish, but we never tell this model it is a fish. So the model will try to again observe the features in the animal, okay, and then put this animal into another group. If let's say the model observed that the features here in this image is not the same as that those images observed in the category number one. If it doesn't see any similarity, then this model will put these images, this kind of the animal into another category. Okay, category number two. Okay, so category number two are those animal without legs. Okay, with the fins, with the tails like this, but without legs. Okay, so the next time, if let's say model see this kind of the animals again, so if let's say the features are similar, so the model will put those, will cluster those images into the category two if they found out that the features are similar. Okay, so during the training process, the model will try to put the trained data into different categories based on their similarity. Based on their similarity. So if their similarity is very high, they will be put into the same category. If their similarities are very low, okay, they will be put into different categories. Okay, so during the training process, we'll need to mention to the model, okay, how many categories we want to get ultimately. For example, we tell the model, okay, at the end, I want to get 10 categories. So throughout the entire training process, the model will try to classify all those training data into 10 categories based on their similarities. So that is the unsupervised learning. You see, the entire process here, they do not need to refer to any label at all. It doesn't refer to the label, but what it does is just observe into the similarities between the data, the features in the data. You try to differentiate according to the similarities. So that is a unsupervised learning. Okay, so the key point here is to differentiate based on the similarities between the data itself. Okay, if they're similar, they'll be in the same category. If they're not similar, okay, they'll be in different category. Okay, so that will be the unsupervised learning with the unlabeled data. Okay, no label is required here. All right. And the next method here is what we call as a semi-supervised learning. So semi-supervised learning means sometimes, you have your data, some of it are labeled, some of it are unlabeled. Okay? So how about this? If you have a group of data, some of it is unlabeled, some of it is labeled. So which training method we should use, right? So in this case here, we will use a semi-supervised learning. Okay, so where you have just a minor part of the data is labeled. Okay, just small part of the data are labeled minor, while the major part of the data are unlabeled. So when you got this kind of the data set, so we will be choosing the semi-supervised learning to train this model. This is very common. This situation is very common because nowadays to get the data to be labeled can be very expensive. Because when you want to label the data, you need to spend time. Let's say you have the image like this. Okay, this is the cat image. So if you can recognize this is a cat, you have to manually put the label to this image, telling people that this is a cat. So it is still fine if, let's say, you just have like 10 or 20 images. Yeah, to label those 20 images can be very fast, can be very simple. But what about nowadays? We say we need to have a lot of this data to train this model. So what about if you have 1 million of the data or 10 millions of the data? So if you have so many data, how long are you going to spend to label the data, isn't it? So you're going to spend more time. Maybe you have to hire multiple persons, to help you to label the data for you. So it's very time consuming. And some of the data, they cannot just simply labeled by anyone. Maybe those data need to be labeled by expert, or maybe scientists. One of the examples is that, okay, if you want to label the gene sequence, or maybe you want to label the species of the bacteria. So this kind of this data, you have to get some scientists or biologists to help you to do some experiment, and try to figure out, okay, what is the species of this data, what is the species of the bacteria in this data. So they have to carry out some experiment first before they can determine for you, okay, which species is this bacteria, which species is that bacteria. So they will have to spend some time on every single data before they can label. So in this case, it takes time again, and you have to hire those scientists, biologists with some, with some yeah. So you have to hire some scientists like that. So it is not easy to get labeled sometimes. Okay, so that's why I'm saying that if you have a group of data with majority of them is unlabeled, it is very common. But in order to allow your model be able to train with all labeled data, so we can use the semi-supervised learning method here to help the unlabeled data get the label with the help of this labeled data. Okay, so let me repeat this. In the semi-supervised learning, we will use the minority of the labeled data to help those unlabeled data to get their label. Okay, so only after everyone got their label, then we will start to train these models again with all the labeled data. So that is what we say a semi-supervised learning. Okay, we will train this model using the labeled data first. So the process is like this. So one of the semi-supervised learning techniques is like this. So when we have this model here, we will first train this model with the minority of the labeled data. So let's say we have 10 labeled data, and then we have another 50 unlabeled data. So let's say. So we will first fit this model, train this model using the 10 labeled data first. Okay, we will train this model with the labeled data first. Okay, so after we train the model, we will see some result. Okay, we will see some result. All right, so this is the first round. So the second round here, we will include some of the unlabeled data together with the labeled data. So maybe among these 50 data here, we will have we will take out 10 of the unlabeled data to mix together with our labeled data here. So total, we will get 20 data over here. Okay, 10 labeled data and 10 unlabeled data. So we'll take these data to be put into the model. Okay, so throughout the process, the unlabeled data will be getting the label. So until the end, we will get the result and together with 20 labeled data. Okay, with the help of this labeled data here, your unlabeled data will be getting the label. And that label that we get from this, from the help of this labeled data, what we call as pseudo labeled data. Okay, pseudo labeled data. Okay, so after we got this 20 labeled data, so we will repeat the step here. So now you got 20 labeled data here. So you will you do the same. So from this remaining 40 unlabeled data here, you will take out another 10. Okay, so this 10 unlabeled data, you will put it together with this 20 labeled data, and then put it into the model. And ultimately, your 10 unlabeled data here will also get its label. Okay, so until the end, you will get a total of 30 labeled data. Okay, so now you got 30 labeled data. So in the next round, yeah, you will do it again. So with from the remaining 30 unlabeled data, you will take out 10 again. So this 10 unlabeled data, and you put it together with this 30 labeled data into the model together, and ultimately you will get 40 labeled data. Okay, you can see that the process here, slowly by slowly, your unlabeled data will be getting their labeled data with the help of this model. Okay, with the help of this labeled data at the beginning. So that is how one of the semi-supervised learning will do. So round by round, okay, we will let every unlabeled data to get their label. And until the end, we will repeat the entire training process again with all the labeled data. Okay, so that is a semi-supervised learning when you will be using this labeled data to help the unlabeled to get the label. Okay, so that will be this semi-supervised learning. And lastly, we have the reinforcement learning. So reinforcement learning here is especially useful when you want to train the model to perform some action. It's not only just to help you to do some classification, but when you want a model to perform some actions, you will need to train this model using the reinforcement learning. Okay, so because sometimes when we want to perform some actions, we might not know how to perform it the best at the very beginning. Just like us as a human, okay? Like the case that I always mention. So if you were asked to play basketball, at the beginning, maybe you don't know how to play basketball. So you cannot say that I want you to learn that immediately you can learn it, right? So we, as a human, we have to go into the court. You know, we have to play with our friends. So we have to perform some, we have to do some practice, and then continuously correct our own actions, correct our own posture. You know, throughout the entire correction process itself, we can only learn the correct method, the correct posture when we are playing this basketball. So we have to learn through the mistake. We have to make the corrections from time to time when we are interacting with our friends, you know, while playing the court. So that is how we as a human can reinforce our own skill. When we were asked to perform some action like playing basketball, or even like to cook. Let's say we were asked to cook a dinner for our family. So before this, we never cook. Okay? So how can we make ourselves a better cooker? So of course we have to, we have to fail a several round. We have to correct ourselves from time to time. You know, we have to do a few cooking. We have to make a few dishes before we can be a really good cooker. So that is how we can reinforce our own cooking skill, isn't it? So same goes for the machine. If let's say you want this machine to be able to serve you water, for example, from the kitchen, so you want it to serve you the water. So how can this machine be able to pick up the water and then work towards you in the shortest route so that you can get the water the fastest? So all this need to be trained. So the model need to learn the best way to get to you, to get you to water by doing some doing some practice. So reinforcement learning here, you will see that the agents here is basically the model. You can say the model that you want to train. So you need to put your model into the real environment. Okay, so that to let this model do some try and error. Okay, to do some try and error. So while doing this try and error, we will also implement a cumulative reward system. There will be one cumulative reward system. We'll be giving the model some reward if the model is performing right, and if the model is performing wrongly, we will give it a penalty. Okay, so based on the penalty and the reward that will be given to the model from time to time, so the model will try to accumulate the penalty and also the reward. Okay, it will try to accumulate those, and until the end, it will try to see, okay, by carrying out which action can get it the most reward. So it will try to compare. Okay, is it the method number one of doing something can give it the highest reward, or by going through method number two, we'll be getting the highest reward? So until the end, the agent, your model, will try to compare the result, the reward, by executing different methods here. Okay, so let's say after it has tried method number 1, the ultimate reward that it get is actually like 10 points, for example. It got a sum of 10 points. So it doesn't matter because we say it will be going through some trial and error, right? So it will try another method as well after you have tried out the first method. So while trying the second method, it will also get some reward and punishment, penalty. So until the end, it will try to see, okay, how much is the accumulated reward by carrying out this method number 2. Okay, so maybe method number 2 is able to allow it to get a reward of 20 points. Okay, and so on. So it will try to compare the final accumulated reward by carry out these different methods here. So until the end, it might realize that, okay, while it is carrying out this method number 2, it got the maximum reward. Okay, so it will make a conclusion. Okay, next time if let's say this agent is in the same situations, it will be using method number 2 to carry out the instruction. For example, serving the owner of this of itself a water. So you'll be using method number 2 because during the training process, it found out that method number 2 gives it the highest reward. Okay, method number 2 allows the environment to give it the most reward. So it will be using this method here. So that is how the reinforcement learning will be training this model. By letting this model to have the interactions with the environment. And let this model go into the field and do some trial and error. So by going through different methods of doing something, so until the end, the agent is able to determine which is the best method to do a certain action. So this reinforcement learning technique here, usually you can see that people will use it to train this autonomous driving car as well. Because you see, the autonomous driving vehicle, they need to drive on the road itself. So that means that this car here need to perform some actions of driving on its own. So how can it make sure that it can drive on the road safely, correctly? So of course, before we can let this car to send a passenger to the destination, we have to train it first so that this car here is able to follow this traffic rules. It knows when to stop. It knows when to slow down. So all of these actions need to be trained. And on a common road, there's so many uncertainty on the road. So we also need to use this reinforcement learning here to train our autonomous car to learn how to deal with different uncertain situations. Like let's say, for example, suddenly, okay, there's a cat running across the road. So how should this car here behave? So all these need to be trained first. Okay? So through this reinforcement learning, so that the next time on the common road, if let's say the car see the cat suddenly want to run across the road, so the car will be quickly step on this emergency brake immediately, and so on. Yeah. So that will be this reinforcement learning purpose. So it will try to train this model, your agents, your machines that is required to perform some actions through some trial and error. Okay, with the help of this cumulative reward system as well. So let this model to learn which is the best method of doing some certain action. All right. So that will be the 4 type of this machine learning method. So if we want to train this machine learning model, so we have to choose one of this method here to train this model. And it also depends on the kind of this model that you want to build. So usually when you want to come up with this classification model or regression model that we mentioned yesterday, okay, we will have to use the supervised learning to train this model. Okay, so for example, when you are training this model, make sure that you will have to label the data. So we will be using labeled data to train this model. Well, from this example, you can see that now we want to train a model to tell us whether a person will enjoy sport or not, if the conditions of the weather is sunny, if the temperature outside is warm, if the wind speed is strong, so whether a person will enjoy sport or not. So this is what we want the model to tell us. But before we can let this model to be able to tell us, we have to tell them, okay, under these situations, okay, the person will, yes, okay, the person will enjoy sport. So this is like a standard answer for these conditions. If the condition is like this, yes, the person will enjoy sport. Okay, if the condition is like that, okay, this person will not going to enjoy sport, will not likely to enjoy sport. And same go for the third example here. Okay, if the weather is sunny, temperature is cold, wind speed is weak, yes, that person will enjoy sport. So these are the label for this data. These are the standard answer for this data. So we want this algorithm to learn the relationship between weather and the standard answer. If we just look into the weather, what is the relationship between weather and whether a person will enjoy sport or not? So usually as a human like us, we will have some idea. Like if we see the temperature or the weather is sunny, for us, okay, of course, we will prefer to do a sport under the weather of sunny instead of rainy, isn't it? So we as a human, we knows about their relationship. So we know that usually when the weather is sunny, people, yes, they will be having we will have a higher chance to see people to enjoy sport under the sunny weather. And if the weather is rainy, we know that as a human, we know that nobody will like to play sport under the raining situations. Right? So that is the relationship that we as a human can understand. Okay? But the thing is that the algorithm do not know. So that's why we have to put in this data to the model so that the model can understand the relationship between the condition and the standard answer. And they need to understand their relationship. And same goes for the temperature as well. So what is the relationship between the temperature and whether a person will enjoy sport or not? What is the relationship? And of course, we as a human, we know the relationship. We know that if the temperature is warm, okay, higher chance a person will enjoy sport. Yes. If the temperature is cold, so lower probability that a person will enjoy sport. So that is what we as a human will know. Okay, but we will also need this algorithm be able to recognize that relationship. So that if, let's say the algorithm can understand their relationship, so the next time when you have a new data coming in without the answer, so your algorithm is able to give us the precise prediction based on the relationships that it can understand. Okay, so that is how that's what we want this algorithm to learn, the relationship between this so-called feature. So weather is one feature, temperature is another feature, wind speed is another feature. So what is the difference? What is the relationship between the features and the label, or what we call the target attribute, something that we want to predict? What are their relationship? Okay, so this relationship, if the algorithm can learn it correctly, you will see that the algorithm will be reflecting the relationship between the features and the target attribute in the parameters value. Okay, we'll talk about the parameters later, but the algorithm will have its own way to reflect the relationship that it learns. Okay, so if it learns the correct relationship, it should be able to give us the correct prediction until the end. Right, so that will be the supervised learning algorithm. And so here is some example here. So as I mentioned, if you want to build the classifications model, like whether yes or no, this is a kind of the classification model, or you want to get a regression model to get some prediction in number. For example, like how much will I benefit from the stock next week? Okay, 10 ringgit or 100,000 of these rupiah. Okay, and what's the temperature on Tuesday? So tomorrow is Tuesday is going to be 27 degrees Celsius. So you see the answer will be in number. So if this is what you want as a prediction result, then you are actually going to build a regression model. And so if you're going to build a regression model, you have to train this model using the supervised learning as well. Okay, so classification and regression model, okay, you have to use the supervised learning to train it. All right, supervised learning. And yeah, so this the classification questions, like if you want to know, will there be a traffic jam or not on access route during the morning rush hour tomorrow? Yes or no? Right? True or false? A or B? So this is the classification questions. Which method is more attractive to the customer? 5 yuan voucher or 25% discount? So these or this, okay? You are just asked to choose between this and this. So don't be confused by the number here, even though there's number in the answer, but it doesn't mean that you can adjust the number, but they're just asking you whether this is better or this is better. Okay, so is a voucher better or it is a discount better? So yeah, the classifications questions like this. Okay, so if you want to come up with this clustering model, we have to use this unsupervised learning to turn a clustering model. So basically, you don't have to get any label for your data, but just fit this data to the model. The model will try to observe the similarities between the data itself and put this data into category, into different cluster. If, for example, in this case here, so the badminton racket and also the basketball are placed into the same cluster because the model has observed some similarities between those. Maybe it's because that these two sport here can be played outdoor. Maybe they are both outdoor game. So based on this outdoor, indoor, so they can put them into different cluster. Okay? So based on the similarities. So if let's say today you want to come up with this clustering model to tell you which audience like to watch the movies of the same subject. Okay, so you might need to look into the audience data. Okay, so what are the previous movies that this audience has watched before? Okay, so based on the previous movies that the audience has watched before, so we can put the audience that has watched the similar movies before into the same category. So based on the previous movies that they has watched. Or maybe we can also classify this audience based on their favorite movie star. Okay, let's say if they like the same movie star, like maybe they both like this what we call this Brad Pitt. Okay, let's say this audience A and audience B, okay, they like to watch Brad Pitt movies. Okay, then we can this clustering model here will try to conclude that okay, maybe these two audience they like to watch the movie of same type because they both like the same movie star. Okay, well for the other audience, okay, let's say the other audience like to watch the movie of let's say Jackie Chan. Okay, there's action star, right? So if let's say the other audience like to watch a movie of Jackie Chan, so we can put them into different cluster because Jackie Chan, Brad Pitt, their movies are a little bit different, right? Their movie is a little bit different, yeah. So maybe we can put them into different category. Okay, so for example, like that, we can let this clustering model to observe into the characteristic of this audience based on what kind of data we have. So we can compare them based on the existing data, based on the feature that we have in the hand. So to cluster them into different, put them into different cluster. Okay, based on the similarities between them. Okay, so these are the example here of the clustering questions. All right. And as I mentioned as well, when you have a mixture of labeled data and unlabeled data, so we can use the semi-supervised learning to train this model. Okay, while during the training process, the unlabeled data will also be getting the label with the help of this labeled data. Okay, and until the end, until everyone can get the label, we will train the models again. Okay, so that to get the best model. And of course, like lastly, we have the reinforcement learning. So the model will need to do some try and error. Okay? The model will perceive the environment, the actions, and of course, make adjustment and choices based on the award or punishment that you get from the environment. Okay, so just like us as a human, you see, sometimes if we were asked to do the reverse parking, so let's say we drive the car It will drive the car, and of course, until when we reach the destinations, we have to do reverse parking to park the car, isn't it? So when we are parking the car, so of course, at the beginning, when we are just the beginner of driving a car, a beginner driver, so we might know how to properly do the reverse parking. So maybe you can see that if, let's say, the parking lot is like this, okay? So when you park the car, you might park the car like this, okay? Like sengit, okay? You park the car in the sengit way. So of course, this is not a good method to do the reverse parking. So you have to do some try and error. You have to do some try and error. And sometimes you have to, go to the parking slot, and then you have to do some try and error. And of course, there will be a reward and punishment system for you as well, which is the sensor. When you try to reverse and reverse and reverse, of course, your car will give you the beep 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 sound when you are too close to the wall, isn't it? Or maybe you are too close to the other cars, or maybe you're too close to the obstacle in the back. So the sensor will be giving you the signal, isn't it? The beep 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 beep. So that signal is kind of like the penalty to you. So if you receive the penalty, what you will do? Okay, you will adjust your own action, isn't it? Okay, maybe you will stop going back. Okay, you will stop reversing back. Okay, you will stop the action. Okay, so this is also another kind of the adjustment that you can make based on the penalty. So if you never got any beep 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 to you, so that means that okay, you are doing it correctly. Okay? And then the other signal that can be given to you is the distance between your car and the car next to you. Okay, so this can also be the signal as well. By looking into the distance between your car and the car next to you, so based on that distance, you can also know whether you are doing it correctly or wrongly. Okay? So the signal must not it's not compulsory need to produce some sounds or give you a signal like some light signal and kind of stuff. So it doesn't need to be that. It doesn't need to be like that. It can be something that you can observe it yourself. It just like I mentioned, that the distance between your car and the car next to you. Or you can also see okay the angle of the car. While you have done with the parking, you can observe into the angle of the car. So that can also be the signal or the penalty or the reward that you can get. So the reward and penalty can be coming in different form. So it depends on how we define the penalty and reward. And based on that, we can know which actions that we have performed is the best in that situations. Okay? So that will be the reinforcement learning. So your model will keep on adjusting itself. It will keep on make some corrections based on the reward it gets. Okay? So that is a reinforcement learning. Okay, so for example here, when you want to train an autopilot system, like those autonomous driving car, so should it brake or accelerate when the yellow lights start to flash? Okay, so of course this autopilot system need to do some action now. Should it brake or should it accelerate? Which action is the better? Okay, and same go for the cleaning robot here. Should it keep working or go back for charging? If let's say the power signal is lighting, okay, is keep on giving this signal to the clean robot. So should this robot going back to for the chargings or should it keep working? If it keep working, what will be the consequences? If we go back for charging, what will be the consequences? So we will have to let this clean robot to experience it itself. Okay? And of course, throughout the process, that we have to give it some penalty or the reward as well. So we have to define some penalty or reward to be given to our model. Okay, so that will be the examples over here. All right, so that will be all about this machine learning classification. So in this part here, we have talked about the 4 types of the machine learning method. So we have the supervised learning, unsupervised learning, semi-supervised learning, and also the reinforcement learning. Okay, so Papa, Ibu, is everything clear for you? Do you have any questions so far?
No, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Pak Winar, for the reply.
Okay.
Okay. So if Papa Ibu do not have any questions so far yet, then I think that before we continue with the machine learning process, we can go for a short break for now. So after the short break, only we will continue to the next part, which is the machine learning process. All right. Yeah. So Papa Ibu, let's go for the break. Okay. So now
Okay.
I'll yeah. Thank you, Pa. Yeah, so now our time is 9:53. So we can come back here after 10 minutes, I think. Yeah, so maybe we can come back here at 10:05. Okay, so Papa
Okay.
Ibu, yeah. Thank you.
May I get the training material right now? I have I can type. You can type in the chat room.
Sure, Pa, sure. I will put this link to Pa in the chat, yeah? Okay. So, but for this link here, if you go into the link, this is how you can get the training material. So, but you have to log into the system first. Okay. So here, log in, and
Okay. I
yeah,
see.
yeah. But you have to if you don't have any account yet in this Huawei Uni portal, you have to register. Just simply put in your yeah, you have to register by email will be better. Okay, so when you register by email, you just need to put in your country, the name, your email, just like this. Okay, so after you have registered, then the next time you will need to just log in using your email or the username that you have registered.
Okay.
Okay, then you will be able to download the material now. Okay, so you'll be asked to log in first before you can download. So when you want to get the material, but you have to go to this tab here. Okay, go to the learning tab, and this will be the material that we'll be using. Okay. Yeah, but you can just let me know if you have any issue to download the material, yeah? All right, so now Bapak Ibu, let's go for the short break. So I will see Bapak Ibu later at 10:05. All right, so if you have any questions, you can just let me know in the chat, yeah?